A well-dressed black man walks into a pristine downtown bank, briefcase in hand, wearing a tailored suit that costs more than most people make in a month. And the first words out of the loan officer's mouth are, "Sir, are you sure you're in the right place?" What happens next will shake you to your core and restore your faith in justice all at once. This is the story of Marcus Williams, a 42-year-old CEO who decided to go undercover at his own bank's branch to see how his employees really treated customers who looked like him. And what he discovered will leave you speechless. I'm bringing you this story on Axiom USA because sometimes the most powerful lessons about racism in America come from moments when the oppressed hold all the cards, but nobody knows it yet. Marcus had built his financial empire from nothing, starting with a food truck in Detroit and eventually creating Williams Capital Holdings, an investment firm that quietly owned stakes in dozens of community banks across the Midwest, including First National Bank of Oak Grove, the very branch where our story unfolds. But success hadn't made Marcus forget where he came from, or blind to the reality that his wealth and status meant nothing if he walked into the wrong room at the wrong time without people knowing who he was. That's exactly what happened on a Tuesday morning in September when Marcus decided to conduct his own personal audit by applying for a business loan at his own bank, dressed down just enough to see if his race would override his obvious financial success. The branch manager, Karen Henderson, was a 38-year-old woman who'd worked her way up through small-town banking by following every rule, maintaining every standard, and never questioning why certain communities seemed to get approved less often than others. When Marcus walked through those glass doors at 10:47 a.m., Karen was sitting at her desk reviewing loan applications, and something about seeing a young black man in expensive clothes immediately put her on edge in ways she couldn't even articulate to herself. Marcus approached the reception desk where 19-year-old Ashley, a college student working part-time, greeted him with genuine warmth until Karen noticed the interaction from across the room and walked over with that particular kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Can I help you with something?" Karen asked, her tone carrying just enough condescension to make it clear she assumed Marcus was lost, confused, or possibly up to no good, despite his immaculate appearance and professional demeanor. Marcus calmly explained that he wanted to apply for a business expansion loan, pulling out financial documents that would make any banker's eyes light up with commission opportunities. But Karen's reaction was the opposite of excitement. "What kind of business are you looking to expand?" she asked, and when Marcus explained his restaurant concept, Karen's expression shifted to barely concealed skepticism as she began asking questions that had nothing to do with his creditworthiness and everything to do with assumptions about his background. "Do you have experience in restaurant management? Have you worked in food service before? Are you familiar with health department regulations?" The questions kept coming, each one more insulting than the last, treating a man with an MBA from Wharton like someone who'd never seen the inside of a business classroom. Marcus answered each question with professional calm while internally documenting every microaggression, every assumption, every moment where Karen's bias showed through her professional facade. When Marcus presented his credit score of 847 and bank statements showing liquid assets in the seven figures, Karen actually frowned as if the numbers couldn't possibly be real. "These documents will need to be verified, of course," she said, implying without directly stating that Marcus might be presenting fraudulent information. "We'll also need to see 3 years of tax returns, business licenses, insurance documentation, and references from previous lenders." Marcus knew from his position as majority owner that standard business loan applications required far less documentation, especially for someone with his obvious financial credentials. "Is this standard for all business loan applicants?" Marcus asked politely, and Karen's response revealed everything. "We have to be extra careful with certain types of applications to protect our depositors' interests." The coded language was crystal clear. Certain types meant black applicants, and Karen was making it obvious that Marcus would face a different standard than white customers with identical qualifications. But the real insulting moment came when Karen suggested that Marcus might be better served by the Small Business Development Center down the street, where they helped people like him understand the loan process before attempting to work with a serious financial institution. Marcus felt his jaw clinch as Karen essentially told him he wasn't sophisticated enough for her. Bank while sitting across from financial statements that proved he could buy and sell her entire branch without checking his account balance. The conversation reached its breaking point when Karen asked Marcus if he had a co-signer with more established credit who could guarantee the loan, despite looking at documentation that showed Marcus had better credit than 99% of Americans. Sometimes it helps to have someone with a longer credit history vouch for applicants who are just getting started in business, Karen explained, completely ignoring the evidence that Marcus had been successfully running multiple businesses for over a decade. Marcus realized this wasn't just bias, it was systematic discrimination designed to discourage qualified black applicants from even completing the process, and Karen was delivering it with the kind of polite professionalism that made it almost impossible to prove without recording the conversation. "Let me ask you something," Marcus said, his voice remaining calm despite the fire building inside him. "What would you need to see from me to approve this loan today?" Karen's answer was a masterclass in moving goalposts, higher down payment requirements, additional collateral, business projections that exceeded industry standards, and personal guarantees that would make Marcus liable for amounts far beyond the loan value. Every requirement was designed to make approval nearly impossible, and Marcus recognized the playbook because he'd seen the reports on discriminatory lending practices that banks like his were supposed to be working to eliminate. Marcus excused himself to make a phone call, stepping outside the bank while Karen and Ashley watched through the window, probably assuming he was giving up and wouldn't return. But Marcus wasn't calling to complain or vent his frustration. He was calling his assistant to arrange an emergency board meeting and his legal team to document what had just occurred. "I need you to conference in Regional Manager David Thompson and Branch Operations Director Lisa Chen," Marcus told his assistant. "Tell them the owner wants to discuss some customer service issues at Oak Grove immediately." When Marcus returned to the bank 15 minutes later, he found Karen helping a middle-aged white man apply for a business loan with roughly half the creditworthiness Marcus had demonstrated. Marcus could hear Karen's encouraging tone, her helpful suggestions, her willingness to work around minor documentation issues. Everything she'd refused to extend to him despite his superior qualifications. Marcus waited patiently as Karen expedited the white customer's application, with enthusiasm and flexibility that highlighted the contrast in treatment so starkly that other customers in the lobby began to notice. When Karen finally returned to Marcus, she had a different demeanor, colder, more dismissive, as if his brief absence had confirmed her suspicions that he wasn't serious about the process. "I've reviewed your application with my manager," she lied smoothly, "and we're going to need additional documentation before we can proceed. We'll also require a larger down payment and an extended approval process that could take several months." Marcus nodded as if accepting defeat, but then he asked the question that would change everything. "Could you please get your regional manager on the phone? I'd like to discuss these requirements with someone in a supervisory position." Karen's confident smile faltered slightly, but she agreed, assuming that her boss would support her decision-making and perhaps even commend her for being thorough with a questionable applicant. What Karen didn't know was that Regional Manager David Thompson was already on his way to the branch, having received Marcus's call and instructions to arrive within the hour. When Karen dialed Thompson's number, she expected a routine conversation about lending standards. Instead, she found herself connected to a conference call that included Thompson, Operations Director Chen, and several other executives she'd never spoken to before. "Karen," Thompson's voice came through the speakerphone with unusual tension, "I understand you've been working with a loan applicant this morning. Can you walk us through your assessment?" Karen began explaining her decision to require additional documentation and extended processing time, describing Marcus as a high-risk applicant who didn't meet their lending standards. As she spoke, Marcus watched her confidence grow, clearly believing she was impressing her supervisors with her careful risk management. But when Karen finished her explanation, the silence on the other end of the phone lasted long enough to make everyone in the lobby uncomfortable. Finally, Thompson's voice returned, but now it carried a tone Karen had never heard before. "Karen, I need you to look." at the customer you're discussing and tell me exactly what risk factors you've identified. As Karen began to repeat her concerns about Marcus's business experience and credit history, Thompson interrupted her. Karen, are you looking at a credit score of 847 and liquid assets over $2 million? The color drained from Karen's face as she realized her supervisors had access to information she thought was confidential, and worse, they seemed to disagree with her assessment completely. There seems to be some confusion about our lending criteria, Thompson continued, his voice getting harder. I'm going to need you to put Mr. Williams on the phone immediately. When Karen handed Marcus the phone, expecting him to receive bad news, Marcus's response shocked everyone within earshot. David, thanks for joining us. I think we've learned everything we need to know about customer service standards at this location. The realization hit Karen like a physical blow. This wasn't a customer complaint call. This was her boss talking to someone with authority over both of them, and Marcus's calm, professional tone suggested a relationship that made her stomach drop. Thompson's voice came back through the speaker, now addressing the entire branch. This is Regional Manager David Thompson, and I'm speaking to everyone at Oak Grove Branch. The gentleman you've been working with this morning is Marcus Williams, CEO and majority owner of Williams Capital Holdings, the parent company that owns this bank and 12 others in our network. The silence in the lobby was deafening as Karen, Ashley, and every customer within earshot processed what they'd just heard. The black man who'd been treated like a potential fraud was actually the owner of the entire bank. Marcus took the phone off speaker and spoke quietly to Thompson about implementing immediate policy reviews, mandatory bias training, and a complete audit of the branch's lending practices, while Karen stood frozen in humiliation as she realized her career had just imploded in spectacular fashion. I'll be expecting a full report on discriminatory lending patterns at this location within 48 hours, Marcus said loud enough for Karen to hear, and I want to see approval rates broken down by demographics for the past 2 years. The other customers in the lobby began to whisper and point as the gravity of what they'd witnessed sank in. They'd just seen a textbook example of banking discrimination, exposed by the one person with the power to do something about it immediately. Karen tried to stammer an apology, but Marcus held up his hand with the kind of authority that comes from actually being in charge. Ma'am, you've shown me exactly how this branch operates when you think nobody's watching, and that's more valuable than any apology you could offer right now. Within an hour, Marcus had suspended Karen pending investigation, implemented new oversight procedures, and turned what started as a personal experiment into a systematic review of discriminatory practices across his entire banking network. The story spread through social media when other customers shared videos of the confrontation, turning Marcus's undercover investigation into a viral moment that sparked conversations about racism in banking nationwide. But the real justice wasn't Karen's termination or the policy changes. It was the message Marcus sent that black excellence exists at every level of society. And sometimes the person you're discriminating against is the person who signs your paycheck. This story on Axiom USA reminds us that racism isn't always hooded figures burning crosses. Sometimes it's polite professionals in clean offices making assumptions about who deserves respect, opportunity, and fair treatment based on nothing more than the color of someone's skin. Marcus Williams proved that the best response to discrimination isn't just anger or resignation. It's the power to change the systems that allow it to flourish. And sometimes justice comes not from the courts or the streets, but from the boardroom where real decisions get made.